I will speak to my own motion on this one. Needless to say, colleagues, this is one of the more consequential matters that I've dealt with in my 2 years on the commission. I really appreciate, as was averred to by Commissioner O'Donnell, the parties to this proceeding coming together to reach settlement in this matter and to present the same to the commission for its analysis and approval. And I also appreciate, as Vice President Fielder stated the very, very diligent work that was done by our staff to review the terms of the settlement proposal and to determine the consequences of the same and whether they were supportable. I would note, as Mr. Hamilton referred to during the questioning portion of this matter, that restructuring proposal has been approved by the states of Nebraska and South Dakota to this point. I would also note that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued an order in late November of 2022 that rejected the protest submitted by the large customer group as to Northwestern's application for approval of corporate restructuring. FERC found the corporate restructuring, as I recall, to be in, quote, the public interest. I'd like to highlight the several provisions in the settlement that I believe that will protect the public and the ratepayer. First, I'm pleased that the agreement assures that Northwestern Energy's customers will not assume in any rates any of the cost of the corporate restructuring. I believe the ring fencing provision set forth in the draft order will ensure the PSC retains the proper authority to regulate Northwestern Energy's Montana operations. Ring fencing provisions will also provide comparable protections to customers against negative risk as the existing ring fencing measures currently provide through the bankruptcy stipulation. So I see no diminution in the protections to ratepayers in Montana. The ring fencing provisions will serve to ensure that Northwestern's public utility assets, facilities, and operations are adequately insulated and separated from any non-utility ventures. Further, the settlement provisions, if adopted, will enhance measures that protect Montana's customers from any regulatory risk that may exist from Northwestern operations in Nebraska and/or South Dakota. Further, colleagues, this agreement, if adopted, will require Northwestern to notify the commission of the sale or transfer of any utility assets over the amount of $10 million. You heard me ask Mr. Hamilton whether that $10 million was the original proposal by Northwestern. It was originally a 25, and so I think by bringing down that number to 10 million, I think we better assure the protections to Montana's ratepayers. So in sum, I believe the settlement terms as to be modified and adopted by this commission are consistent with the public interest, and I will be supporting it. With that said, if my colleagues would give me a little indulgence to speak to this matter, to provide a little history as to how we got here, which I think is informative to the public and need some elucidation to the public of the fact that here in the year 2023, we are still dealing with the consequences of Montana's decision in 1997 to deregulate Montana Power Company. I don't think many folks in Montana and/or at the legislature understand the impact that deregulation had and is continuing to have some 26 years later. So with my colleagues' indulgence, I'll reflect on a little Montana history. Today's action is incredibly an action flowing from the wake of the problematic decision almost 30 years ago to deregulate the Montana Power Company. As I'm sure my colleagues are aware, in 1997, the then governor signed into law the Electric Utility Industry Restructuring and Consumer Choice Act. The then governor's decision to sign the Electric Utility Industry Restructuring Consumer Choice Act into law is arguably the single worst policy decision in the history of the state of Montana. What followed is, of course, well known by Montanans and for those of us who work on the commission and work hard to protect the rate-paying public while assuring the adequacy of the operations of regulated utilities. As I stated, in 2023, as my colleagues know, we are faced daily with the consequences in the wake of that decision in 1997. As we all know, Montana's power rates exploded, going from some of the lowest in the nation to some of the highest in the nation. In Butte, that historic city contained within my PSE district. Hundreds of dedicated employees lost jobs and Montana families suffered financially. Montana Power Company investors across the Treasure State saw their investments dwindle to little or no value. At one point, the stock was traded at an incredible 33 cents. 33 cents. Also, the value of employees' 401ks dropped significantly. People lost their means of retirement. And of course, relevant today to today's docket and our decision, history shows that by early 2002, Montana Power sold its transmission and distribution assets to Northwestern Energy. And of course, as history has shown, Northwestern had little or no generation assets at the time and was correspondingly operating under a legislatively imposed price cap scheme that basically forced Northwestern Energy into bankruptcy in 2003 as power prices skyrocketed across the country. And we all, of course, know what happened with the Enron situation. So here we are in 2023, some 20 years later, considering measures that revise provisions of consent order 6505E issued by the commission in September of 2004 that arose out of the bankruptcy proceeding. What has happened since 2000? What has happened since the 2003 bankruptcy? Well, in 2007, the Montana legislature, I think it was 2007, passed the Electrical Utility Industry Generation Reintegration Act, which authorized Northwestern to vertically integrate in the same manner as Montana Power Company operated for more than 80 years. And of course, the Montana legislature passed the pre-approval statute to help Northwestern Energy get back on its feet. Incredibly, this is a public policy decision that is still being played out in the halls of the legislature as we speak. I want you to think about that. What is more, in the last 20 years, the commission has considered the purchase by Northwestern Energy of an interest in Colstrip 4, as well as a purchase of Montana Power's company's hydropower assets, namely the 11 hydroelectric dams that were sold off to PPL Corporation in the aftermath of the 1997 legislation. You've certainly heard colleagues, folks talking about that the Montana ratepayer has paid for those assets more than one time as a result of the deregulation decision. All the while, deregulation has cost Montana's ratepayers millions upon millions in increased power bills. The point here is that Montanans, including those championing for deregulation in 1997, need to know that some 26 years after the former governor decision to sign electricity deregulation into law, there is not a day that goes by here at the Montana PSC where the agency is not dealing with some aspect or consequence of the 1997 electric deregulation decision, including this particular docket. So let me finish by saying the public will be wiser for knowing the truism that the mistakes of the past should be heeded so that they are not repeated into the future. So I encourage my colleagues to support this joint motion to approve settlement.